local sales taxes are up a bit. One number that's a little concerned over the years is our room and board of prisoners that we get from the city of Pasco is down from $1.1 million to $763,000, and historically that's been kind of going down. But this year it may be because of less prisoners due to COVID. I know they were trying to minimize the number of inmates due to that. I'm not sure how they do that, but that's what I hear. Salaries and benefits. We have just a normal organic change of $418,741, and this is due to employees receiving step increases or increases to like retirement or other numbers that are dependent on just gross income. There hasn't been any COLAs added to that number. So that's just the organic change if people are doing good jobs and they get their normal step changes. And then the associated taxes that go along with that. As far as contingency.
Tom, does that
go ahead.
Tom, does that not include the COLA that's already approved?
If COLAs have been approved, then yes, that would be in that number.
There's one bargaining unit I think that we've settled on that amount is already included.
Okay, so that doesn't.
It would, yes, if it's been approved.
The deputies. Okay, thank you.
Just another thing, our contingency. This is an amount that for unbudgeted expenses that happen up during the year. We have $250,000 in the budget. Prior years have been higher. Normally we don't use all of that. And then COLA history. The last 3 years we've had about 2%. 2019 was 2.5%. This year, I think there was a couple special purpose districts that went in at 2%. We have not budgeted a percent, so that's something the board's going to have to decide. As far as in your book, under I think tab 6, yeah. For those of you that have a book with all the detail, there's a estimated COLA percentage. Like 1.5% would be 206,000, 2% would be 275,000, and so forth. It goes up to 3.5%, although we would not probably expect that.
Tom, is that a table you provided in the past? Because that's very helpful.
I think that may be something new that Maisie put together for us this year. She's helped us a lot putting the budget book together. So at least in your book, I do believe that's a new enhancement.
Okay, well, just in the way of feedback, it's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, that is good information.
We've generally not had much of that discussion this early in the budget process, but just for my benefit, as well as I think the commissioners, I think that's helpful to have that information up front.
Okay, so if you look at our total requests from departments, this year it adds up. The budget preliminary highlight sheet that you have, it actually has the wrong total of $3.164 million. I discovered that this morning. But that's broken into personnel requests of $321,337. Other than personnel service requests, which is just miscellaneous stuff like office supplies or insurance, that's $852,196. And then our capital expenditure request came in this year at almost $1.9 million, and that compares to about $1.55 million last year. So that's a request. That's something that the board's going to have to decide if they want all or part of that number to look at.
Tom, on that total submitted request for 2021, is that a typo on that number that's exactly the same as last year? I didn't catch that.
Yes, it is, and I discovered that this morning. It's actually $3,073,403, and I apologize for that.
You should see the revised number on the screen.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I saw the two numbers are the same, and I thought, well, it's possible, but it's unlikely. But
It
thank
was,
you
yeah,
for the correction.
that would have been coincidental for sure. And then we just have our other funds that we deal with. The many departments have special revenue funds that they receive a particular tax or other fee or service charge. And also other funds are in there that are larger, like our Public Works Department, for example, is our biggest miscellaneous fund. So the total of those miscellaneous funds outside of our current expense or general fund is $66,192,290 compared to about $59,300 last year. So those budgets have gone up somewhat too, but they're based on their own individual self-sustaining revenues and expenditures. So that's about all we had. If anybody has any questions regarding just where we're starting, we'd be happy to try to answer them. Otherwise, I think we're looking at having the assessors start out things. And that is on tab 9, if you have a book. And on that note, generally how we've done it is we have the departments go over any revenue changes, especially if they've had a change since they turned in the budget, because we do that based on like 6-month estimates. So if you have any noteworthy or changes that we want to add to subtract the revenues, now would be a good time for us to add those. And then the board usually likes to hear your requests for expenditure changes. So I guess with that,
Mr. Peck again. Just before we move to tab 9, on the sales tax revenues, you made a reference that there might be an additional 600,000 or so, and I wasn't quick enough taking notes. Is that across the board on sales tax receipts, or is there something unique happening there?
well, they're all dependent on sales taxes. It's not exactly the same. Like you can't go to, like, for example, the first and second 1% sales taxes that we used to remodel the juvenile justice and jail in 1995. And then there's another criminal justice sales tax on top of that. They go up too, but I don't think it's the exact same percent as like our normal retail sales tax, and I don't have an explanation for that.
Yeah, let me try and ask the question better. The 600 or so thousand of additional tax revenue, sales tax revenue, above and beyond what is shown in the printed document, is that an estimate from all those different retail sales tax sources, or any one particular?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I guess I was doing a broad scope there. I believe that's just, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just the sales taxes in the Treasury Department for just our normal sales taxes.
Okay,
Normal
all right.
general. Okay, yes.
Well, the reason I was asking is because I didn't know whether mentally to dedicate part of that to criminal justice for 3/10 or anything else, but that's just straight up retail sales tax, sounds like. Thanks for the clarification.
Yes, well, thank you for having me clarify. And we were very surprised that it's so large, because when we produced the annual report at the end of May, we had to put a note in for COVID, like subsequent event, and we honestly thought we'd be down a couple $1 million overall revenue. But that wasn't the case at all. Every month when we have our budget review committee, we try to come up with some bad news, but our sales taxes have been over projection every single month this year. So maybe.
Well, like you, I expected the numbers to be down. Do you think that the state's increased enforcement of sales tax collections on purchases from out of state might be playing heavily into that? I know Amazon, everybody has done it for years, but a lot of other businesses have been added every year from which they're collecting that sales tax. Any thoughts?
That's very possible, because I think with all the stimulus money people received, and then maybe extra unemployment and canceled vacations, I think there was a big increase in online sales. So that enforcement certainly could increase that number.
But I think our area has been fairly unique, because I don't think we've been as dependent on tourism and things like that. And then even just with the stimulus money that people got, and then some people making more money on unemployment than not. And ultimately, So you're not traveling and just spending it around the county. And so I think we've been fairly unique in that people weren't leaving the county and going elsewhere and spending that money. It was staying within the county and being spent. Because I think there have been many counties throughout the state that have suffered quite a bit on sales taxes where they haven't been collecting it. But in our case, we've been collecting more than budgeted.
I think Tom or Tim, you're awful close. I think the stimulus money that everybody received, and the fact that there's a number of people working from home, there's more DOI projects going. Lowe's, I've been told their June revenues were highest ever. I know I went in there one day and I can understand that because you couldn't hardly move. It looked like a freebie. So I think you're pretty close. There's just people staying home and that stimulus money, and they aren't, they don't have the traveling expense back and forth to work and babysitters and so on. So I have to agree with Commissioner Peck. I kept waiting for that shoe to fall with sales tax all summer long, and just each month it got better. So thank you.
Good problem to have.
So I think we're up. Peter, are you ready?
Sure. I'm ready to go.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for your time this morning. So at Tom's request, revenue in the assessor's office is, we don't have a lot of revenue generators. However, last year we budgeted $3,500 of revenue for this year. We're about 70% of that number. That comes from open space fees that are collected for open space applications, as well as publications of maps and different things like that from our GIS department primarily. So year to date in the assessor's office, like a lot of others, we did not have normal expenditures this year due to restrictions placed on us by COVID, but right now we're at about we have a miscellaneous expenditures of about $43,400 in my office, and we've spent a little over $25,000, meaning that we have about 40% of that money still unspent this year, with no major expenditures anticipated for the rest of the year. Our biggest expenditures typically are postage and mailing and printing and those things for personal property listings, as well as revaluation notices. That going forward did not change. It's hard to anticipate what next year's expenditures will be on some of those items like travel and those things. So I made no changes in my lines going forward, anticipating some return to normalcy next year. So I did ask for an additional appraisal staff position this year, as I have last year, and my predecessor, Mr. Marks, had done several years before as well. I know, while I realize, and I'm cognizant of our need to be careful with the tax dollars that we're given, there also becomes a point where I need the staff to adequately complete the tasks that I've been given. And that's become more challenging just from the growth in Franklin County. If you look at Franklin County, since 2011, there were approximately 28,800 parcels in Franklin County that were taxable. As of October of this year, we have 32,450 parcels. That's an increase of about 13%. In 2019, we had 691 open building permits issued in Franklin County for new homes. This year, we had, up through October, we had an additional 400 new home permits taken out, and that's county and city. So I'm talking all the residential improvements are new homes in the county. So if you look at that right there in 2 years, this year's not over, and we also had a reduction in permit activity and that kind of thing for a couple months there. We're almost, I would anticipate adding, another 500 units this year. That's another 1,200 houses in a couple of years. So, and we've been averaging 1 to 2% of parcel growth a year in our county. I think part of it is to realize that one large vacant parcel that we see that turns into a new plat is one parcel turning into 80 to 100 homes that must be inventoried, inspected, placed on the tax roll, and valued annually. So the amount of new construction that's been added to the rolls in 18, it was 255 million, 19 was 264 million, 2020 was 264 million, and 2021, even with the contraction and the stoppage of construction this spring, we are $266 million. Not to say that my office is generating that, and I understand that, but the economic impacts that have been discussed already here, our economy is still strong. We're in a housing shortage, and there appears that we're going to keep adding inventory that has to be valued and appraised annually going forward. In comparison to some of the other counties, over the past 4 years, we have been one of the top, if not the top county in the state that has the number of parcels that have new construction added. Approximately 6.5% of our parcels annually are having new construction added. Whether they're new homes, new improvements, new garages, new additions, business buildings, those kinds of things, and all of those have to be valued and inspected. So annual reevaluation of 32,000 parcels requires additional staffing to keep on time and keep on budget. A lot of the things that my office processes need to be done in a timely manner so we can get to the point we are right now, setting the budget so you gentlemen can make your decisions on what needs to be done so we can levy the appropriate amount. I'm asking for an appraiser too, which is what we would consider an inexperienced appraiser. A couple years ago when the former assessor left, we were able to, we had somebody retire. We were able to bring in a couple people at one time. We've been training those people. However, it takes time and management to train that kind of staff. So we'd like the chief appraisers busy training those people and training people commercially would really be helpful if we could get someone with some experience. I've done some looking. I've watched listings of employment advertisements that have went out. It's hard to hire good people unless we're competitive. I've looked at the Department of Licensing site, which would give us an idea of what kind of appraisal trainees are out there are available. On their list in Benton and Franklin counties, there's 29 appraisal trainees. Of those, only 16 are still actively training to be appraisers. So the pool's going to be competitive, and we would like the ability to somebody that can come in and add to the team and require less resources from the county to invest in training and education and mentoring. So that's all I have on my request for this year, there are a couple of other comments I would make. Looking at the capital outlay request, the handrail, which is shown on the facilities request for $9,700 approximately. That's for the handrail that goes down the ramp into the office where a lot of our senior citizens do travel down to reapply for their senior exemption. There is no rail on either side of that walkway, and it is inclined, and it does get icy. We had a senior who went to grab the handrail that wasn't there, missed it, and smacked her head into the concrete wall. And that's what started the request for a handrail there. So I think that's a safety issue that really should be considered, and a liability. The other thing, just going forward in my office, I have administrative staff out front of 4 people, all of which are now of 60 years of age, except for one. So those 3 ladies that I have out front are going to be, if they've indicated to me in the next couple of years, they're going to be retiring. That's a consideration I think that we're going to have to work our way through as an office. But bringing people in and training up replacements is going to have to be a consideration we'll need to address probably in the future. Because, that's the customer service end of the office, so it's very important. I think the other thing is too, like our cartographer, our GIS tech, Robin, replacing her is going to be difficult just because that's such a specialized skill set, and you're going to need somebody to come in here that will be able to work with Robin for a period of time to understand how things are set up, where things are, understand the program and how that works. And that impacts, her work impacts the city, public works, elections, planning, you name it. It goes through a lot of different avenues. So I'm just kind of putting that out there that we'll need to work together to address that going forward. So I think at this point, gentlemen, if I didn't need the position, that I wouldn't be asking again. But we are on time, under budget. Some counties do not pick up all of their new construction in their county every year. So they'll set a threshold where they'll say, okay, in this area, if it's in the inspection area, we'll pick up new construction. But if it's out of the inspection area in the other 5 areas of the county, we're only going to pick up new construction valued over $10,000. Well, that hurts those districts and that hurts equity and valuation. So I'd really like to maintain the staffing going forward to be able to do that in a timely manner. Thank you.
Pete, Commissioner Peck, that last comment about only picking up properties in certain areas, is that under the new rules that we got over the last 2-3 years? Is that even lawful for them to do that?
No. I mean, in statute, all new construction is to be valued and placed on the rolls as of July 31st of the appraisal year. However, there are counties that do set a threshold. The elected official makes that determination to do that. Especially in some of the areas where you have smaller districts, that could really make an impact to their ability to garner a little bit of new revenue every year. The other thing is too, is just the equity of some improvements would get picked up and others would not.
Because we're capped on our property tax revenues, when new taxpayers get added or they get properly assessed, that reduces the burden for everybody else.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct. Okay. Thank you, Peter. Any other questions for him? No. I see
Just
you're...
make a quick observation about the assessor's office. And my recollection is that all 3 commissioners over the years have held this thought. And that is that when Steve Marks was there, it was one of the most efficiently run offices in the county for the amount of work and the number of people and the size of the budget. And obviously only speaking for myself, but I'm pleased to see that our new assessor, Mr. McInderfer, has continued that tradition and is continuing to run a very lean operation, especially in a time of probably record-setting growth. So thank you, Pete.
Totally agreed. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's important to our office as well as a whole. We didn't shut our doors. I told you I wouldn't during this whole thing to facilitate commerce. And you know, we're in this for the long haul, just like everybody else. So I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So with that, like I said, that I think reading what Keith and the auditor's office, when that's a maybe on the employment, considering our end result with revenue. So it's not a no, but it's, like I say, it's a, hopefully we can do that.
Okay, duly noted.
Mr. Chairman, what process do we want to use this year for making those judgments?
Well, I think Keith and the auditor's office has done that for us.
So, yeah, so far we have identified those items that we think necessarily require a yes answer or support. Certainly those final decisions are the discretion of the board, not to me or the auditor staff. But in order to avoid protracted discussion of fairly immaterial items where we have found some opportunities to save money or reduce expenses, we typically just move forward with those as approved. Those that are significant in nature, like a personnel request where we think there is a need for board discussion and some maybe broad analysis how it fits into the final budget plan, we typically try to put those as a maybe if the board is indicating at this juncture relative support, presuming that there's adequate revenue to cover those. If there's something that strikes the board as clearly exceeding our expectation or desire and the board wants to say no to those requests at this time, you're perfectly free to instruct us to do so, and we'll take those items out. But I think just from my opinion and my support of the assessor's request, I think this one squarely falls into that middle ground of the board will likely support it in the event that we have sufficient revenues to cover it. As Mr. McInderfer indicated, it's been a while since they've increased the size of their office, and with the growth in the number of parcels and properties that have to be assessed more frequently, it's probably something we want to support.
I'm not looking at the merits of this one, Keith, right now. The question is about the process and whether you have indicated a recommendation for approval, and if so, where is that in the book so that I can track this? That's one. And two, I'm certain that Commissioner Cook meant to convey what you just said, but it was a little unclear to me whether he was making a determination as the chair that this should go forward, or if there was something else behind it. It's now clear that there's something else behind it, so maybe you can tell me where in the book I can find these. I don't have to ask again.
Well, I will tell you that I have not formally indicated a recommendation for approving or not approving this. I think this is kind of the opportunity for the board to ask questions about the nature of the request. And I was kind of using that as an example of the process of what we would go through, so that
Well, then let me come back to the beginning and say, I think I heard Commissioner Cook say that at least preliminarily he supports this request, and I'll just add that preliminarily I do as well. And that's the process we've used in the past, is to make sure that we at least had two commissioners that said that preliminarily we supported it, and we'd make a final visit toward the end. So thank you.
Great.
And if I could add, Mr. Peck, we do have, we're not showing on the screen, but when we met with Mr. Johnson, we do have some balancing worksheets that do list all the regular requests, personnel requests, and capital requests. So we are keeping track during the meeting on which ones you do have a maybe on it. And also, if you look under your tab 9, the first page under their detailed budget worksheet, and it's kind of highlighted in orange. That's the cost of it, and then the M means maybe. So you can find it there as well.
Oh, okay. All right.
And
Well, and that is not different than what we've done in the past. I just missed it. So thank you.
Okay, and you bet. And also there is an attachment behind that which shows more of the detail of he requested, although Mr. McInderfer explained it quite well.
Yeah, and I read through all that. It just, I was looking for that process by which, as we went through, we could indicate to you and to Tim and to Keith what the board's preliminary inclination was so that we could mark them as yes, no, and maybe. And I just simply missed that column in the chart that we used last year. So thank you.
And just
I
one.
think the only other thing I would need to add on Peter's discussion is that the employee would require an additional $6,000 for desk and supplies. So I just need to keep that in mind also. Thank you. All right, Josie, you're up. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. So,
Good morning.
Tom, Tim, just wanted for the record, the property taxes I estimated, it was based on previous years that were taken from the road shift, and I see that I don't have the spreadsheet up with the Excel sheet, but the line numbers, I'm sure they are the same as what Peter has.
I believe, Josie, that we get those off the assessor's office hands us a breakdown of it's under tab 3 in your workbook if you have one. Otherwise, it's a sheet that we got from the assessor's office. And they do not have the road shift in their net calculation. So it's not in the preliminary budget.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, but thank you for clarifying.
Then also, for Fund 3611101 interest from investment, we have 45,000 on that for the 2021 budget, and I would like to decrease that to 15.
15,000. Okay, and it's under tab 23 too, the treasurer's office worksheets.
We had gone.
And is that adjustment?
So, Josie, that's investment interest. You want to go from 75,000, subtract 15 to 60?
It's the next line, 45,000 down to 15.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The 45,000.
Oh, okay, I was. Down. Oh, was it down 15 to 30, Josie, or is it down to?
We're going to 15,000.
Okay, that's.
What line item, what number are you working from, White? There's too many numbers here without having some kind of reference.
3/4 of the way down the page, Bob. It's interest from investment, 36,111,001.
Okay, got it.
Okay, and the reason for that is we had bonds and they were called, so we no longer have those bonds.
Well, I must have missed something. That interest from investments shown to 45 in 20 and showing to 45 in 21 preliminary. What What did I miss?
We're going to move that 45 to 15,000.
Okay, that's not on the sheet here. Okay.
Since we've submitted this in September, we've had bonds called.
All right. I was just confused listening to numbers and looking at numbers. So thank you.
So if anybody has any questions on any of this, I'd be happy to answer it. Other than this, and I'm still good to go with what I submitted.
You're estimating, property tax going down by 12%. Where is that number coming from?
Mr. Cook, I believe it's because there's no road shift in it, so it's kind of netted out from that, so it's a little bit misleading.
So the 2020 working budget under that property tax line includes the road shift?
It does.
Okay.
Maybe we should have put an asterisk there, but yeah,
Okay.
we're dealing
That's
off
helpful.
an inflated number due to the road shift or diversion.
The 2020 number would have road shift
Okay.
1% and the bank capacity as well.
That makes a lot of difference.
In the past, when we've had these preliminary documents prepared, did you assume that there was a road shift and included it? Or is this the same way we've reflected it in prior years?
That is correct, Mr. Peck. We always net it out to start the budget year because that's a decision that you make along the way. So we always start with the lower amount.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, I see, Josie, you have no additionals or additions to your budget. The travel has been staying the same, then training.
Everything is the same.
Okay. All right. Commissioners, any other questions for Josie?
I'm just curious what the year end is looking like for your budget. How do you expect to finish out the year? It's on the expense side.
Mr. Peck?
Yeah, I was asking how much carryover for funds left over at the end of the year are you anticipating? Or another way to ask it is, how is your spending year to date compared to percentage year to date?
Get that here for you. We're at 63% year-to-date for expenditures.
53% on expenditures,
63.
63. And Keith, what is our current year percentage? 80% roughly?
That's about 75%.
75, yeah.
So 75 would be 9 months, right? And we're approaching the end of the 10th month, so
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're
75 to 80%. Okay. I'm just doing an obvious comparison here to see how healthy their budget is and whether or not they're going to be fine through the end of the year. And it looks like with 60-some% expended at this point of the year, that's just about on target since we tend to have a lot of wrap-up things at the end of the year. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one question on their postage shipping freight line. You have 11,000 budgeted for 2020. That's the same number in the 2021 preliminary budget, but it looks like you've already exceeded that through June 30th. Are you just making up the difference with the funds remaining in your other lines? Or should there be an adjustment for postage, shipping, and freight in the 2021 budget?
It's usually about the same.
Okay. So you think 11,000 is adequate for 2021? Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
All right, thank you. I think we can move on to O&M, Josie.
Okay, for our O&M, that means there's been no changes. We usually have about 20 to 22 foreclosures to start the year, and it's been consistent with that. And usually end up, depending on how we like, about 1 to 5.
Questions on O&M? Hearing none, Josie, thank you.
All right, thank you.
We're on to HR. Carly, please.
Please. Good morning. I don't have to just submitted from the budget. We can start with, as the board recalls, we had a reduction in the budget last year with the elimination of one of the positions in the office, so we've got 40. The changes this year are probably somewhat related to that. I hadn't made any changes to travel and training last year as a result of that change, so I've made those reductions this year. Transferred that payment to the county administration, so I no longer need that one in my budget.
So just as a note, in the, in tab 25 where we're at, you'll see that there's 3 expenditure changes, and all 3 of those are in green with a yes. Those were added to the preliminary budget because they're ultimately decreases to the budget, and so those were added for the preliminary numbers. Generally, if there's a reduction in a overall budget or just a move from one line to the other for the same amount, those are added and for the preliminary budget. But if there's an increase, then those would be a board decision. And even the ones that are added, those certainly can be changed by the board's discretion as well. But to try to streamline things. We, like these ones here, it's a decrease to the overall budget, so those were added in.
Carly, Commissioner Peck, I see that your 4,100 professional services line is empty, and I see the contracted services line. The contracted services, I'm assuming, are the gentleman that helps with our negotiations.
Yes, those are our labor consulting services, negotiations, grievances, arbitration,
Okay.
those
Thank you.
services from the West Group.
Wesley,
Mhm.
that's what I was trying to pick up. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Carly? It's pretty much straightforward, and she also has a year a report in the back part of tab 25. So. Any further questions? Hearing none, Carly, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. I will just note for the record that we have the civil service budget as well. There were no changes requested for that budget. It's a pretty small budget. It's working pretty well for us, so nothing on that one.
Okay. Was there a... Oh, there it is. I missed it entirely. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, okay. All right, with that, guess we can take a 5-minute and everybody get a cup of coffee or whatever you need, and don't hang up. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey, Commissioner Cook, we are a little bit,
Yes.
we've recovered and got a little bit ahead of schedule. In order to be able to reset the technology, we would like to maybe extend that to a 15-minute recess, if that's okay with you.
All right, whatever we need to make it work.
So we'll reconvene at
15, we're at
10:30.
10:30. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
You want us to sign off and come back on, or?
I don't think that's necessary.
Good. Too much problem getting back on, it seems like.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He locked it here. So,
He locked it,
yeah,
that's why he couldn't.
well,
Oh.
he locked it here, so. Shoot.
Do you want me to have him open it for you?
I can log in as administrator. I just hope it won't close his thing. Actually, we are projecting, so that portion is working.
I better run to the girls and I'll be right back. Hold on, our AV capture is, thinking.
Is that where we're gonna find the screen?
It stopped. Oh, there we go. Okay, we should be on, YouTube and AV capture and WebEx. We're good to go.
All right. Just trying to bring AV capture up, so hang on just a second. Okay, it's all shown as the agenda on that, okay. All right, it is 10:30. We're back for our second half of this AM review of budget for 21. So with that, our next up is planning and building. We have a trifecta of Derek, Matt, and Keith. So who's going to take us in?
I don't know.
I believe that would be Derek. Well,
Yeah.
if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So, thank you. I've tried to cut where I could within the budget, anywhere that I could find discretionary spending. We did reduce those numbers as much as possible. Unfortunately, there's just not a lot of slack in that area. One thing is the NRAC fund for $5,000. We've been carrying that fund for quite a few years. I spoke with the 2013 NRAC chair, which is the last time. I'm sorry, NRAC is National Resources Advisory Committee. And this group gets together when something happens, such as, say, wildlife decides they're going to designate a big chunk of our land as some protected environment. The NRAC $4165 on page 2. Spreadsheet. Yeah, that's it.
Correct.
All right. Not a lot of requested changes in the building budget except for salaries. Because of just natural increases. I also do have a retiree or somebody who's going to be retiring in January. So there's a PTO payout. And that goes 50% to the building budget and split between both departments. And so it comes out to about 5,467 per, and that's the other numbers in there are as provided through the preliminary budget.
If I could
Go ahead, please.
If I could add something on the payoff, we did not add that to your salary and benefits because that position was budgeted at 7 for the whole year. So there will be probably we'll be having somebody come in at a much lower grade, probably 1 or 2. And then, so there will be that salary savings amount also from looking for a new employee. So we didn't add that to your expenditures because of those items.
So basically you're figuring that differential is going to make that a wash.
Yeah,
or
it'll be
we'd actually save money.
correct.
Well, Tom, the reason why in me and Derek's discussions is because we do have somebody that is going to be retiring. We'll have an idea. We'll actually know that exact date. The goal is to try to get somebody in there before they retire to get that individual trained. And so you will have, always my goal is that there'll be a little bit of overlap there. I think you're right. It won't be the full amount because somebody would be coming in at a lesser step of the same grade. But in the same token, for me and talking with Derek, I like to, if we actually know when somebody's going to leave and we have this kind of advance notice, it's nice to try to hire somebody and at least get about 2 weeks a minimum of overlap for training.
My plan would be to, start looking at filling that position and sending out the applications and having somebody on board optimally by middle of January so that we have a few days at least for them to learn. The question being whether an existing staff person is interested in moving into that position or whether we have to do a cold hire. That could affect those timelines as well. But it is the intent to maintain full admin positions. But we may have a month or so where that's not the case. And I agree with Peter in that, they're going to come in at step 1 compared to a step 7. So we would have some savings there. Anything else on that? Then going down 3,100, office and operating supplies, reduce that by another 1,000. Professional services seems to be on track for about what we would need for that, so we maintained the 12.5 on that. Really, actually, there were no more changes to 31 as proposed by
Derek and Matt just minute on 4,100. You got professional services at 12.5 preliminary, but then you've got a 6,250 request, which brings up the working budget to 18,750. And so I'm confused.
That's
Mr. Cook, that's in the increase was in the planning department, Mr. Cook, and we're in the building department still.
Well, I'm reading 2 line items at Department 1130, both of them 101, 132, both of them 4100 object, both of them professional services. One's reading 12.5. Is that not in planning?
Right, so 31 is planning professional services, building professional services at 12.5. Then 32, 4100 is actually at 28. Because we have an additional aspect of the comp plan that we need to get completed. But it should, for 10, 11, 101, 131, 4100 professional services, staff's recommendation was 12.5. I'm not sure what exactly it is you're seeing there that has a different number there.
Okay, what was that number you were looking at again?
101, 131, 4100, professional services 12.5, and that was 12.5 in 2020, and we were looking to keep it at 12.5. That fund is used to.
There's got to be some variance here somewhere, because what you just read to me at 131, 4100 professional services at 12.5. You're showing a working budget at 12.5.
So if you look at,
But then you go over.
Yeah, it looks
Then
like
you go
the
over
12.5 got entered in two places there.
within tab 11, on the very first page in tab 11, there's 12,500 for professional services in the 101, 131 budget. On the very next page, there's 12,500 that's in for the working budget. But then there's some additional requests in the planning budget, 101, 132. So there's that 12,500 is in both budgets of the 101.31 and 101.32. 101.32 has some additional requests as well related to it. But I think what Derek was speaking to previously was just the 101, 131 budget, which does not have a request attached to it. It's baselining at what it was in 2020.
Thank you. Yes, that exactly sums up. But because we have two lines, generally in planning, the professional services tends to go to consultants and things like that. With building, that's where the building department, our contract, we have those revenues there for that. Because we do a lot of inspections, and we contract with the building department. That's their name. Actually, I think now they're called Northwest Inspection or something. But anyway, and so when we can't get to an inspection, we contract that out, and those are handled by that firm. They invoice us for it, and then we pay them.
So Derek, you're asking for an extra 15.5 in the 132, 4100 line.
Correct.
You've only used, let's see, year to date, looks like you're on track. You used 3,000 in the first half of the year on a 12.5 budget. So you're expecting, even though you're not going to use the full 12.5 this year, for next year, you think you need that full 12.5 and the additional 15.5. And that's for a work on the comp plan.
Correct. And there'll be some additional work that we'll be doing. Our goal, of course, is to try to get the comp plan completed by the end of 2020, but it is possible to roll over into 21.
Well, then what is the extra money for in 21?
Go ahead, Derek.
Okay, I was going to say that is a quote. The 15 is for a critical area ordinance update. As a requirement with an update on your 10-year comp plan update, you have to update your critical areas ordinance as well.
sound like you just said okay, all right. So even though the comp plan is due to be completed by the end of the year, it wouldn't necessarily be published or released until we do the critical areas?
Correct. It's a second piece
that was
to
a
it.
little confusing when you said the comp plan will be done at the end of the year. That would imply the critical areas was done also, and that's why I wasn't tracking. So I get it now.
Yeah.
And let me follow up here. You've only used 3,000 of this budget halfway through the year, so you're going to way underrun this line for this year. But again, for next year, for the critical areas piece, you think you need that full 28, the 12.5 plus the additional 15.5.
Yeah, because we haven't really been using the on-call services this year, but we will probably be using more of that next year.
Okay.
Commissioner Peck, this Matt, if I can add something there. You know, with going through the comp plan update, of course, as the board is well aware, we've had to really pull back and wait on some work to be done by the city of Pasco. And so we intended to spend that full 12 this year, but we really haven't been able to move forward until the city of Pasco has done the work that they were required to do and should have done. That being said, as we get closer to, I think Derek is being a little optimistic, but even as the city of Pasco has kind of completing their process, there's still a lot of review and work that needs to be done by staff and the consultant in that process of what the city did, because ultimately it's going to be the county that has to defend the comp plan updates. And so
you think Derek is being optimistic on the timeline or on the budget?
I think the timeline, yeah, because I believe that we still have quite a bit of our own work to do with reviewing what they did so that we can defend whatever we bring
we'll
to
get
the
it done
board.
in 21?
Oh, yes, I do.
Well,
I
then
believe it will
doesn't
be done in
matter
the first quarter.
It doesn't matter whether it's in January or December. If it's in 21, it's in his budget, so that's good. And is he good on the numbers, you think, the budget? Or is that optimistic also?
No, I believe that we're good on the number based on estimates and what we got left to do.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that conversation.
Hey, Derek.
Okay. Anything else on that?
Actually, Derek, I was just curious on the building permit side of things in the building department. It's baseline from 2020. I was just curious because this year, I know it's been down. I think, revenues have been down quite a bit, understandably. Do you think that, that's a pretty good projection of not, and it's tough to know what to expect in the coming year, but you're pretty comfortable with that number at what it is?
I think, yeah, and it really wasn't changed from last year. And I think that we hit, we average up generally about 30 permits a month. And then, hundreds of inspection a month. But in March, April, and May, we were really restricted on what we could issue out. Those numbers dropped down pretty significantly, like by more than half, and then they rebounded. And we've been running right now a higher than average number of inspections and permit issuances. In July alone, we issued 43. And then, so it's starting to come up. And the market here is a little different than some other areas in that we don't see the lull in the winter that a lot of jurisdictions do. It tends to continue or even will spike as far as permits for planning and land use actions will spike almost in the winter in preparation for spring activity. So, assuming nothing bizarre goes on, I think those are pretty solid expectations. I think we probably would have had been much closer to those numbers this year had we not had the COVID situation. Because that's affecting, you know, people's decisions to pull permits or do remodels. And right now it's really hard to predict how that's going to affect the overall system, because for some people, they're like going to reinvest in their own, you know, remodel of their place. Other people are trying to get out of where they're at, and there is some indication that those folks are coming here. So, yeah, and if yeah, I think those are pretty good numbers to work with.
Derek, Commissioner Peck, I'm looking, you're the top of your planning and building sheet. You're showing 650,000 for building division, building structures, et cetera. Underneath that, permits for Connell and Mesa are showing nothing. And then you've got personnel services for Connell and Mesa. So we're providing services for them, and you're just lumping any permit fees for them into our broader line up above, or how are you doing that?
Those four, go ahead.
Well, maybe just start by telling me about the personnel services for Mesa and Connell.
That is, again, where the line item that it's the way that they've got it set up to where Connell will send us stuff, we do our review, and then if those so this is paying us.
Yeah, go ahead.
Commissioner Peck, we have ILAs with both of them, interlocal agency agreements with both of those.
Right, I know that.
Cities of Connell, and so that's basically their reimbursement for payment for services by our building staff.
Yep. Okay. So up above, Matt, where it says permits, City of Connell, City of Mesa, excuse me. Why are these lines blank? And if we're not doing permits for them, why do we have these on the?
It's a change in the bars coding that we're trying to capture those revenues in an appropriate bar. So it's kind of the transfer from the old bar system, or what we used to code things out, to trying to get them more in line with what the bars manual shows now. So okay, you'll see that as we kind of transfer, and of course bars codes change from year to year as well. So it's just trying to stay in line with the bars manual.
It's blank in 20 and 21. Are you actually issuing the permits for Connell?
Yeah, no. What happened? We perform the inspections. Connell issues the permits.
Okay, so that explains the personnel services and not the permit line. All right, that's what I was looking for. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other questions about building?
I have none. Okay.
Okay, now we're moving into planning, 101-132. Again, no real changes from last year as far as resource accounts. The preliminary or primary changes occurred in the expenditures is due to salary increases. And again, the PTO, as we discussed with building, the same thing applies here. 50% of this position would be paid by building, 50% by planning. And the rest of the numbers, again, are preliminary budget salary increase estimates. Reduced office and operating supplies by 1,000. Here's the professional services where we're looking for an increase of 15,800. Well, that's not quite right.
And that's for the critical areas plan.
Correct.
Derek, your 2020 year-to-date actual, let's go right up to the top of the page. Other business license permits, you're showing 49, almost 50,000 for the first half of the year. And yet your whole budget for next year is 81. That's almost a 20% reduction year over year. Can you tell me about that?
I'm sorry, I have 81 for business license last year, 81 this year.
Right, but you're showing a year-to-date actual through the midpoint of the year of 49,639, which puts you on track for almost 100,000 a year. So is that an anomaly, or are we going to get 100,000 next year also? And if so, shouldn't we budget closer to 181?
Well, it's a matter of what happens is we get most of our business license revenue within the first 6 months as everybody issues, all the existing, and what we pick up for the rest of the year is the one-offs or people that are new starts or somebody that's only got one job.
Good answer. Thank you.
Then, knocking travel in half again. I can't rule out that there may be some need to go somewhere, but we're really trying not to do that in the department. I think that's also going to be a lower risk because I think most stuff's being done via virtual events and stuff. And that was about the extent of the changes. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Then there's an $87 increase to the fleet services, but that's just not COLA, but increase costs associated with that. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Your new hire doesn't expect to have to travel to get any training done?
No.
Okay. I have nothing else. All right. Thank you, too. What do we got else? We got a miscellaneous 108. Which is growth management. And I see no changes there whatsoever. Any discussion from either of you?
Yes, we know that there's money left in there, but before we utilize any of it, we want to make sure that we understand what that money was originally intended for, if there's anything tied to it. But ultimately, that would be, we would look at ultimately depleting that if available to utilize that as far as our comp plan update in some fashion. So it's for both of us kind of educating ourselves on the origin of that fund and ensuring that that if it is going to be spent, that it's being done so in accordance with the guidelines or the laws that are associated around it. But I'm assuming that we got that as a grant at some point, but maybe the board is more aware of the origins of that. So
Hey,
I
Matt.
have to apologize. I just haven't done a good job of educating myself on it yet.
Hey, Matt, if I can chime in, you're right. I've got the resolution creating that fund. It was 93-068. And it did say that it originated from a grant.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was the original grant for our comp plan when the county opted in to growth management. And so I'm assuming it could be used, but we just need to make sure. And in reality, it's probably already been used in effect. So,
Well, Matt, because those are restricted funds, you might want to put those to your critical area efforts first.
Correct.
Before you go into your.
That or any overages on the comp plan contract, these types of things that are based on growth management requirements. As we have that requirement, we have to double check to make sure, but I believe that we're able to utilize those funds. Because like Matt said, we already have, it's just that we didn't pull it out of that line.
Well, Commissioner Peck, I appreciate you bringing that up. Utilizing those funds for the critical areas and whatever's left for the remaining of the, certainly that can be used to offset the planning budget as well. And so
My
that theoretically
point
you
is
could lower the
simply-
planning budget by that amount.
Yeah, Matt, my point is really to use those funds first before somebody in Olympia says, hey, these grants have been out there for a long time, and they just sweep that fund. So spend them first, clean it up, and then use the other funds. That's all I was saying.
Yep, appreciate it.
All right, any other questions for the? Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we'll move on to district court, please, Jerry.
He was on earlier.
Tell Mike he needs.
I still see the screen on here, and it's still muted though. Judge Roach?
No, it's switched. It's Mike Killian is first.
It's what?
Mike Killian is first, and Mike, you need to, there you
He's
go.
unmuted.
Yep, I'm unmuted. Commissioner Cook, we switched because Jerry had preliminary hearings this morning.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
I see Brad just stepped away.
Mike?
Hey, Michael, congratulations
By the
on
way,
your,
award.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Why don't you start with 15 seconds of telling us about that so everybody knows.
So I was awarded the County Clerk's Clerk of the Year for 2020. It's an award that is, first year they put in however many names to be nominated, and then the association votes on what clerk they want to receive the award. So it was Barb Miner and myself for this year. Usually they only do one, but they did two this year because I guess they like us both equal. So,
Well,
but anyway,
thanks.
well, congratulations anyway.
thank you. So my budget is pretty much status quo from 2020. We didn't close at all when the pandemic started. So really, all of our lines are looking really good, except for some of our filing fees, which have gone down because people thought we were closed, so they weren't coming in to file for divorce or those type of things. So other than that, we're pretty much on schedule. We are at 50% of expenditures as of the 19th of this month, and our overall budget, we're at 76%, which is pretty much on track. And that includes salaries and benefits as well. So I don't know if you have any specific questions on the budget itself.
The only thing I see, it looks like you have some, there are reductions in expenditures on salaries.
Yes, I did. Once the lawsuit was finalized from the Supreme Court, which I don't know if you all know, it was a 9-0 decision in my favor, in the county's favor. And since that happened, I was able to reduce one of my part-time records clerk. And then when another staff member went to work for federal court, I reclassified and went from a grade 15 to a 13 on that position. So that basically saved $50,000 this year and roughly $75,000 out of our budget for next year in salaries and benefits.
Mike, can you go to the spreadsheet and just point me to the right line here so I can put my eyes on it?
For the salary and wages?
Yeah, for the changes you were just talking about. I see it at the 101, 260, 1,000 salary and wages. But you're talking about these reductions, and I'm seeing an overall increase from 20 to 21, 48 in 2020, and 504,000 in 2021.
I'm not seeing that. I'm looking at the budget submitted.
You see on the screen what?
Never mind, Mike. Never mind. My mistake.
Okay.
when you guys got swapped, I hadn't flipped my pages from.
From Jerry's to mine.
To yours, and I'm going, what in the heck is he talking about? Yeah. All right, you got me. At least you know I'm paying attention.
Yes, you are.
Close anyway.
Closely.
So,
Do you have any question on the 160 then we can move to the miscellaneous budgets, the 116, which there's no change on that, which is the courthouse facilitator program. Then we have the 117, which is the LFO fund, which is the grant that we received from the state, and there's no change for that either for 2021.
looks like it's pretty stagnant for this year then,
And staying open really allowed us to stay pretty well within our budget projections, you know, still processing cost reports, taking collection costs, which we've actually been doing wage assignments as well since March this year. Since we haven't had court hearings, we've been able to garnish a lot of the offenders who are working who haven't been making payments, which allowed us to stay on target with that fund as well.
Like you may have already covered it indirectly, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask about the LFO collections positions that we added, and
Right.
we had a handshake agreement with the board that as long as they continue to have the dual benefit of holding people accountable and paying the costs of those collection services, that we'd be okay.
Right.
Are they still contributing enough to our collections and accountability to justify their costs?
Yes, our anticipated budget is 145,000 for this year, and we're at 122,000 right now in that line.
Okay. If we didn't have those positions, where do you project we would be?
Probably zero right now because there's no court hearings and we've been doing garnishments on these offenders. So we're actually sending out wage assignments to their employer. Then we get the answer back, and then we will get 25% of their wages if in fact they make enough for us to get that 25%. So that's where that 122 has come from.
Yeah, well, COVID has really changed the dynamic of that whole situation.
Right.
I hadn't considered that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, any further questions for Mike?
Mike, when you were mentioning the position changes, you mentioned the reduction of a part-time position. I almost thought I heard you mention another change as well, a regrade.
So we didn't fill the part-time records clerk, and then when my jury manager, juvenile supervisor left for federal court, we reclassified that. Actually asked the board to I hate to say the word downgrade, but we asked it to be moved from a grade 15 to a 13, and the board approved some months ago.
Grade is always a good word, Mike. Regrade.
Regrade, yeah, for the road department.
Yeah. All right, any further questions for Mike? Thanks for everything, Michael.
All right, thank you.
We expect Judge Roach back at this point, or?
He may not be joining us till 11:30 if he's in court.
Okay. So I'd expect 20-minute recess.
Yes.
It's about 11:10.
Let me.
Here's Judge Roach.
Judge Roach is here. He's on the
He's
bench.
scheduled to be on at 11:10.
Hi, Judge.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine.
Good.
Looks like you're ready to go to work with your robe on.
We just wrapped up a docket. We actually have half of it finished, but we're in no rush. Go ahead.
All right, well, it's your discussion, yours and Kelly, so talk to us.
All right. Kelly's standing right here to my right, and what we have is a situation that we are looking at some significant numbers that you could understand, that you would be interested in. You could understand all this, but if you could be interested in, we are down about 50% on filings in civil matters. Last year, for example, we averaged about 1,000 filings a month, I believe, in civil. Well, I think it was about 1,000 a month. This year, we're down to about half that. We are, and it hasn't picked up. I thought it would pick up, but it has not. The collection agencies went into dormancy. That's where most of these arise. They are coming out slowly, but I think that they haven't gotten back up to speed. I don't know if they will in November and December. We may see a massive crush, but it certainly doesn't seem like it. I thought it would happen sooner. It has not. So anyway, we're down 50% on all of those filing fees because that activity has not been occurring. In addition, during when COVID first hit, the sheriff's office and the Washington State Patrol were not writing tickets, and so revenues from traffic infractions, non-criminal civil infractions, is down significantly as well. And those are the two places where our revenues are down the most. And the traffic infractions are picking up some, but they're not what they were. And so we don't have that flow that we had. Our expenses have stayed pretty consistent. For next year, we are going to have an increase in our translator, our interpreter expense of about $13,000, and we're asking for that increase. But that is the only increase we're asking. I believe that we're ahead of budget at this point for this year, and we anticipate that to continue because our expenses have not been what we had projected.
You should be able to see on screen, looks like they've spent $49,395.71 on a $55,000 budget so far this year.
That sounds right.
Okay. All right. So I guess I failed in the past. The maybes have not been added on to the working budget on any of them.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. May see anything else on the district court budget?
Just curious, what's the total delta between this 90,000 drop in revenue and I guess about $110,000 delta between the 2 years? Looking at combining the 90,355 reduction in revenue and the increase in expenses.
Well, then any decreases as a result of reduced civil filings and reduced infraction revenues. Am I answering your question? I'm not sure if I'm
just looking at the combined effect of an account where revenues are down significantly, 9%, and expenses are up 2%. I'm just looking at the total effect rather than looking at these in isolation. So it's about $110,000 difference.
there's a request for the 8,000 increase in contract services, attorneys and interpreters.
It's actually a total of 13.
Total of 13. Okay. That's another 5, so about 115 on the delta. Okay. As I go through these, on each one, I try to capture a net effect on that budget. Overall revenues, expenditures, everything rolled together. Is it going up? Is it going down? As we go through these several days doing these, it becomes informative. So that was the purpose. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions for the judge? I think we can move on to, what else we got on that? 270, the trial court.
That'd be probation.
Yeah. Correct.
Okay. So, and looking at that, our projected revenues are down slightly, but our projected expenses are up slightly, with the natural increase in wages to our employees. And one of the reasons our revenues have been down is because we have not had work crew, and I believe we charge $5 a day for that, or $15 a day, $15 a day for that. And not only were we in a period where we could not even have work crew, but since then we have revived our work crew, and we are limited to the number of people we can take due to social distancing. I might add, and this is just in an effort for clarification for one of the reasons, we have kept our clerk's office open straight through this, back to 2 hours a day or. Okay, so yeah, we were closed for about 30 days to just one window. And yeah, but otherwise we've stayed open, and we've been running at full time because of access to justice concerns. And we have not really missed any court dates. We have had to shuffle things, and certain things we set out. And for example, jury trials, we did not have any jury trials, and we're scheduling them again. But we have tried to remain available to anybody who wants access to justice. And so we have met with people directly by telephone a lot, and also remotely where available. So our services have not ceased.
Any questions? Okay, we'll move on to trial court then.
Yeah. And you're aware that that is just a quarterly amount that we receive, I believe, and we use it for different purposes that are mandated for trial court improvement. I believe that the most important use of those funds on our behalf, we receive those funds, but we share them with Superior Court. The most important use of those funds is since last year when we met, just shortly after COVID or shortly before COVID, we started doing things remotely from the jail. So the sheriff is no longer transporting people in shackles through the hallways and elevators into our courtroom. We do everything remotely now. We acquired a $60,000 group of equipment, not a piece of equipment, but a group of pieces of equipment. And we now see everything online through a big screen TV they have at the other end of the jail. And we're doing those things without ever moving people through the hallway. So as a security matter, it's been extremely beneficial. And as a convenience matter for the, certainly would be shocked if it hasn't saved the sheriff's office an awful lot of money, and it's put us on a schedule that gives us predictability we've never had before. So those are the kinds of things we use the court improvement funds for. In addition, things like impaired, and we bought a seat. We needed a bigger chair to enable jurors who are bigger to be in the jury group. Just different things that come up. Those are the things that money is used for. And it comes to
Keith,
so.
Keith, Commissioner Peck, I recall the improvements with the remote hearings. I didn't recall that was trial court improvement funds. Is that your recollection? I don't remember.
Let me insert here, only 50% was that trial and court improvement. I think the other 50% came from an IT budget amount.
Yeah, that does ring, that rings familiar. I noticed that the trial court improvement fund is up 14%, which I think is an interesting footnote, reference the combined negatives on the rest of your budget, which obviously are COVID driven, and you've given, I think, a great explanation for why revenues are down, why those costs are up. Just interesting that the state in their trial court improvement has put extra funds in there, and I wouldn't be surprised if those two weren't connected. The extra funds are a recognition of that. So all of that commentary is to get to a couple of particular points. One is I know that the state has state and federal COVID related funds that they shepherd for these things, and wondering if we might not appeal to them to help bridge some of the gap in district court and other COVID things. It looks like maybe they touched on it with the trial court improvement fund, but a direct allocation seems like a reasonable thing for us to ask for, maybe through WASAC. So just an observation at this point.
And I will respond that we have applied for anything that has been available that we could get. And was it more related to PPE and the personal protection? So explain that to me again. Kelly's briefing me on something. Go ahead. Oh, we applied for everything to do with this. Okay, so what she's referring to is, and we're kind of pointing up this way because that's where our monitor is, so that it started out as an estimate of $60,000. I think it ended up at 50 something, wasn't it? And that $50,000 purchase occurred before COVID. It had to all be put in place, and we literally started about the time COVID started. It was serendipitous that the two came together at the same time. But regarding, and I think this is to your question, Commissioner Peck, regarding the PPE and money we could apply for, we have been provided certain things kind of on an unsolicited basis, masks and some other things. And we've also applied for something. And did we coordinate that application through somebody in the commissioner's office, or who did we coordinate that through? Oh, through IS, we did that, so.
I'm just looking at the standpoint that you're down 126,000 on a relatively small budget overall between the different accounts. And I think it's a big enough number to go to WASAC, which I will do, and suggest that WASAC, representing all 39 counties, put together proposals for the courts to say that, these are percentage-wise much bigger impacts than we're seeing in other parts of our county government, and that the little increases in the trial court improvement fund are fine. They come nowhere close to addressing what is a real delta. So if it's 125,000 for us, for some other counties it's even bigger. So it's just an observation. As we're going through the budget, I I'm looking for anything that we go back to the state and say, we'd like you to backfill us because we've been hammered by COVID. And this is one I frankly didn't expect to see this much delta in the numbers.
Okay, all right. One, if there's nothing additional from anybody, one other thing I will say, the collection agencies are in the business of collecting, and though there has been a slowdown, for example, in our activity, I have not issued, we were directed by a Supreme Court order not to issue bench warrants. So we had a long period where we didn't order any bench warrants except a particular balancing act regarding balancing the safety of the public versus the risk of the individual that we were arresting getting COVID. And so we're kind of through that, and we're back to issuing bench warrants on a less restricted basis. That doesn't necessarily result in more revenues, but it can have an effect on revenue. The other thing about our activities is the costs and expenses that people are trying to collect go on, and the collection agencies, I anticipate at some point we're going to see that restriction on filings go away, and I think we're going to see a growth in filings, at least a bump, and so I don't know when that will be. I'm not sure it will happen, but that could have some positive effect on revenue if and when it happens. The infractions, that's gone. Those infractions were not written at the time. Those opportunities for revenue did not exist because there were no traffic infractions written, but the collection filings is a little bit different. Say that as a practical matter for your understanding.
Further questions for the judge? Do you feel this video conferencing is working like it should, and the Superior Court doing the same thing, Jerry?
Oh, it's been extremely helpful for us. The only hiccups we've had is a couple of days where the cameras were not clear. And as a judge, we're trying to weigh responses and the pulse of the human being standing in front of us. That is not as good with video conferencing as it is when they're standing here in court. But for all of the other reasons, and we still will have live testimony in trials and in certain motions and things of that sort. So in the routine arraignments and just continuing a case because there needs to be further discovery, it works fine and it's efficient. It certainly is a nice security feature for the courthouse. So it's a trade-off. There are pros, there are cons, but for the most part, as far as the day-to-day operations, it's very pro. The con is you're not talking directly to people. You can't see them breathe and watch their eyes as closely.
Just like we're doing today.
Exactly. So.
All right. Thank you. Any further questions for the judge?
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to let you go. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our AM agenda. Anything else, Keith or Karen?
I don't believe so. Nothing from our end.
Well, we're due for a break. I'm sorry.
Mr. Cook, I've got a WASAC meeting this afternoon from 12 to 1. And I'm looking at who's in that window, and it looks like that's all pretty much lunchtime, right? That's when we're coming back.
That's what I understand here too. We come back at 1 o'clock with the facilities.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And it'll work out with me. I got a chair of Hanford Economical Development this afternoon at 4, but according to our schedule, that'll work also. So, just for declaration, I do have of course, tomorrow afternoon we're done at 2:30, so, Wednesday, I think I can make it for sorry about these phone calls. Think I can make it to the end of the agenda. I need to be in Olympia for a state board meeting on Thursday morning, so just a forewarning.
So I've got
So, with
that same meeting Thursday, the CRAB Board, County Road Administration Board, but I won't be traveling over. I'll be doing it electronically, but that'll start at 10 on Thursday. So perhaps we can move through this quickly enough that we finish before 10 on Thursday instead of our scheduled noon on Thursday. Because we'll need, obviously, 2 commissioners.
Yeah, Thursday, it goes till noon on the AM, and there is no PM on Thursday. Okay, we'll do the best we can.
Okay.
So other than that, we're in lunch recess until 1 PM.
Very good.
So we'll sign out and re-sign in at 1 o'clock.
Correct.
Okay, thanks for all the help.